You have $1 million idea sitting in your Notes app right now, but somehow you've been binge-watching Netflix for the past 3 hours instead of working on it. If you've ever felt like you're simultaneously the most ambitious and laziest person you know, there's actual neuroscience behind why this happens. And understanding it might be the key to finally breaking the cycle. Here's what's really going on in your brain. It doesn't make sense, does it? You have the vision board, the detailed 5-year plan, the app wireframes saved in 17 different folders on your desktop. You can see it all so clearly. The launch day, the revenue projections, the life you're going to build. You genuinely want this. The desire is real. The ambition is real. And yet, you can't get out of bed before 10 a.m. You've reorganized your desk 4 times this week instead of writing a single line of code. You feel paralyzed every time you open that blank document. Most people think this is a motivation problem. It's not. The real cause is something psychologists call approach-avoidance conflict. In the 1930s, psychologist Kurt Lewin discovered something profound about human behavior. He found that when a single goal has both positive and negative aspects simultaneously, your brain experiences 2 competing forces pulling you in opposite directions. One force says approach, move toward the reward, the success, the achievement. The other force says avoid, run from the threat, the judgment, the potential failure. Here's what makes this sinister. The bigger the ambition, the bigger the fear response. Because your brain sees that goal is simultaneously rewarding and threatening. Think about it. Starting that business isn't just exciting. It's also exposing yourself to criticism, to financial risk, to the possibility of public failure. Your brain registers all of it. It's like pressing the gas pedal and the brake at the same time. You're revving the engine, burning fuel, going absolutely nowhere, just creating friction, heat, and eventually burnout. Recent neuroscience research confirms what Lewin suspected. When faced with approach-avoidance conflict, your amygdala, that ancient fear center, activates, triggering anxiety and discomfort. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex is trying to plan and execute. But the emotional system often wins. Marcus was a software developer who spent 2 years planning to start his app company. 2 full years. He had spreadsheets, market research, language designs. He could pitch his idea perfectly at dinner parties. But here's what was actually happening in his brain. The vision? Exciting. Pure dopamine. His reward system lit up every time he imagined the success. The execution? That triggered something else entirely. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of inadequacy. Every time he sat down to actually build the thing, his amygdala registered it as a threat. Not metaphorically. Neurologically, his body responded the same way it would to a physical danger. Heart rate up, stress hormones flooding, overwhelming urge to escape. So he did. He researched more, planned better, stayed safe. But here's what Marcus didn't understand about how his nervous system was responding. The 3 psychological mechanisms. So why does this happen? There are actually 3 specific mechanisms your brain uses that create this paralysis. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Mechanism number 1. Perfectionism as self-protection. The first mechanism is one you might recognize in yourself. Psychologists call it maladaptive perfectionism. Here's how it works. Your brain sets impossibly high standards not because it wants you to succeed, but because it wants to protect your ego from real failure. Think about that. If you never start, you can never truly fail. Dr. Thomas Curran, who has spent over a decade studying this phenomenon at the London School of Economics, discovered something disturbing in 2017. He analyzed data from over 41,000 college students across 3 decades and found that perfectionism has increased by 33% since 1989. But here's the darkest part of his findings. The most concerning type, socially prescribed perfectionism, is following an exponential trajectory upward. That's the kind where you believe others expect you to be perfect. Your ambition? It becomes an identity rather than an action. You're not someone who's building a business. You're someone who's going to build a business. Future tense. Always future tense. The bigger the dream, the higher the stakes. The higher the stakes, the more perfect it needs to be. And the more perfect it needs to be, the more reasons you find not to start. Jennifer had a 40-page business plan, 40 pages of market research, financial projections, and competitor analysis. She'd spent 6 months on it, but she couldn't launch. Not yet, because her website wasn't perfect. The logo needed tweaking. The color scheme wasn't quite right. The copy on the homepage needed one more revision. Her conscious mind told her she was being thorough, professional, detail-oriented. But here's what her subconscious was actually saying. If I fail with a perfect effort, I'm inadequate. But if I fail without trying my hardest, well, I have an excuse. That business plan? It's still sitting on her hard drive. 3 years later, the antidote is counterintuitive. It's called the B-work strategy. Give yourself permission to execute at 70% and iterate. Why does this work neurologically? Because it bypasses the threat response. Your brain doesn't register a 70% effort as identity-threatening. It's just practice, exploration, low stakes. And low stakes? Your amygdala stays quiet. Mechanism number 2, the dopamine trap. Now for the second mechanism. And this one's sneaky. It's about dopamine, but not the way you think. Dr. Gabrielle Eddingen from New York University spent years researching what she calls fantasy realization theory. And what she discovered might make you uncomfortable. Planning and fantasizing about success gives you a dopamine hit without the effort. Your brain literally can't distinguish, at least initially, between imagining success and achieving it. In her research, she found something shocking. The more positively people fantasize about their desired futures, the less effort they invest and the less successful they are in realizing those futures. Read that again. More positive fantasies equal less success, because your brain gets the reward from the fantasy itself. You've already felt accomplished, already felt successful. Why would you need to do the actual work? It's called anticipatory dopamine, the pleasure of looking forward to something. And it can actually be stronger than the pleasure of achieving it. You know that feeling when you plan your perfect morning routine at 11 p.m.? You're lying in bed, mapping it out. 5:30 a.m. wake up, meditation, cold shower, healthy breakfast, 2 hours of deep work before the world wakes up. You feel accomplished just from planning it. Energized, motivated. This is it. Tomorrow, everything changes. The morning comes and this is your brain getting the reward without the work. David bought every productivity app. Notion, Todoist, Asana, Rome Research. He created elaborate systems, color-coded tags, automated workflows, perfectly organized project hierarchies. He felt productive, busy, like things were happening. But he never actually wrote the novel. The planning was the dopamine. The systems were the dopamine. The achievement? That required something his brain wasn't getting. Action. The solution comes from research on implementation intentions. Instead of I'm going to write my novel, you need, if it's 6 a.m. on Monday, then I will write 300 words at my desk. Specific situation. Specific action. This technique bridges the gap between fantasy and reality by creating a neurological shortcut. When the situation occurs, the action fires automatically. No dopamine-draining planning required. Mechanism number 3, limbic friction. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The third mechanism has a name coined by Stanford neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman, limbic friction. And it explains why you can feel completely exhausted, despite doing absolutely nothing all day. Here's what's happening. When your prefrontal cortex, the part that holds your ambitions, your plans, your rational understanding of what you need to do, conflicts with your limbic system, the part that processes anxiety, fear, and threat responses, it creates psychological static. Huberman describes it as the strain required to overcome states of high alertness or lethargy to engage in a desired activity. Your brain is revving and braking simultaneously. The energy consumption is massive, but the output? Zero. This friction is exhausting, not metaphorically, neurologically. And here's the cruel twist. The bigger the goal, the more energy required to overcome the friction. The more important the task, the stronger your limbic system's resistance becomes. It's like your brain is a phone trying to load a massive file on 1% battery. It just freezes. The circle spins. Nothing happens. You feel the strain, but there's no movement. That's limbic friction, and you experience it every single time you try to do something that matters. When researchers studied Olympic athletes who choked under pressure, they found the same pattern. The moment their performance became identity-defining, when the stakes weren't just about winning, but about who they were as athletes, their limbic system activated. Heart rate spiked. Cortisol flooded their system. Fine motor control deteriorated. The more they wanted it, the more their brain treated it as a threat. The ambition itself became the enemy. The 5-minute start rule exploits a loophole in how limbic friction works. Your brain massively overestimates the activation energy needed to start. But once you're in motion, even tiny motion, the resistance collapses. Tell yourself, just 5 minutes. Just open the document. Just put on your shoes. Why does this work? Because it bypasses the threat response. 5 minutes isn't threatening. 5 minutes doesn't define your identity. 5 minutes is nothing. But here's the secret. Once you've started, your brain recalculates. The limbic friction drops, and suddenly, continuing feels easier than stopping. So, you're not lazy. You're experiencing a completely normal neurological response to high-stakes ambition. But here's how you work with your brain instead of against it. This is the truth that changes everything. That lazy but ambitious pattern you've been beating yourself up over, it's not a character flaw. It's actually high sensitivity to psychological threat. And that sensitivity, the very thing you've been trying to fix, is the same trait that gives you heightened awareness of potential. You see opportunities others miss. You envision possibilities that don't yet exist. Detail-oriented thinking. You notice the gaps, the flaws, the ways things could be better. The capacity for complex vision. You can hold multiple scenarios in your mind simultaneously, weighing outcomes, calculating risks. Your brain isn't broken. It's calibrated for survival in an environment where mistakes have lethal consequences. The problem isn't the sensitivity itself. It's that your modern goals, launching a business, writing a book, building something meaningful, are triggering ancient alarm systems designed for physical threats. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to recalibrate the threshold. It's a feature that needs calibration, not a bug that needs fixing. Remember Marcus? The software developer with 2 years of planning? Here's what changed. He stopped trying to fix his laziness because there was nothing to fix. Instead, he did something radical. He acknowledged the fear response. Every time he sat down to code and felt that familiar wave of paralysis, he didn't push through it. He named it. My amygdala is perceiving a threat right now. This isn't real danger. This is just my nervous system doing its job. Then he started with 15-minute work sessions. 15 minutes, below the threat threshold. His brain didn't register 15 minutes as identity-threatening. It was just tinkering, exploring, low stakes. He separated his identity from outcomes. The app wasn't his baby anymore. It was just a project, an experiment, something he was testing. And critically, he shifted from outcome goals to process goals. Not launch a successful app. That's outcome-based. That's threatening. Instead, code for 15 minutes 3 times this week. That's process-based. That's controllable. Research in sports psychology confirms this approach. A meta-analysis published in the International Review of Sport and Exercise Psychology found that process goals produce the largest effect on performance, significantly larger than outcome goals. Because process goals keep your focus on what you control. And what you control doesn't trigger your amygdala. 6 months later, Marcus's app launched. It wasn't perfect. The UI had bugs. The feature set was minimal. Some reviews were harsh, but it was real. It existed. It was out in the world. And here's what surprised him most. The fear he'd been running from for 2 years? It was manageable, not comfortable, but survivable. Because the fear wasn't about the app at all. It was about what the app meant. And once he separated the two, he could finally move. There's one more piece to this puzzle, and it might be the most important. Dr. Kristen Neff, an associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin, has spent over 2 decades researching self-compassion. and her findings flip conventional wisdom on its head. People who are kind to themselves about their failures, who treat themselves with the same compassion they'd show a struggling friend, actually achieve more than self-critical people. Not less. More. Her research, published in journals like Self and Identity, shows that self-compassion is positively associated with mastery goals and negatively associated with performance goals driven by fear of failure. Self-compassionate people are motivated to achieve, but for intrinsic reasons. Not to prove their worth, not to avoid judgment, because they genuinely want to grow. Here's the mechanism. Self-compassion reduces the threat response. It makes starting less psychologically dangerous. When you know that failure won't destroy you, when you know you'll treat yourself with kindness regardless of the outcome, your amygdala can finally relax. The paradox is this: accepting your current state is what allows you to change it. Not accepting failure as inevitable, not lowering your standards, but accepting that you're human, that you'll make mistakes, that progress is messy. This isn't about lowering standards. It's about lowering stakes. Because when the stakes are lower, your brain stops treating every task like a threat. And when your brain stops treating every task like a threat, you can finally start. So, the next time you're lying in bed with a brilliant idea and zero motivation to act on it, remember: 1. Your brain sees the goal as a threat. That's approach-avoidance conflict. The ambition and the fear are happening simultaneously. You're not contradicting yourself. You're experiencing a normal neurological response to high stakes. 2. You're getting dopamine from the fantasy. Every time you plan, visualize, and imagine your success, your brain rewards you as if you've already achieved it. Switch from fantasy to implementation. Use implementation intentions. If this situation occurs, then I will take this specific action. 3. Limbic friction is real. That exhaustion you feel when you've done nothing all day, that's your prefrontal cortex and limbic system locked in conflict, burning energy with zero output. The solution: start smaller than feels reasonable. 5 minutes. 1 sentence. Just opening the file. Your brain massively overestimates the activation energy required. But once you're in motion, the resistance collapses. Here's what you need to understand. The gap between your ambition and your action isn't a character flaw. It's not laziness. It's not a lack of discipline. It's not proof that you're broken or defective. It's information. Information about how your nervous system processes stakes. Your brain evolved to keep you alive, not to help you launch startups or write novels or build businesses. When it perceives threat, real or imagined, it does exactly what it's designed to do. It protects you. The most successful people aren't the ones without this pattern. They're the ones who learn to work with it. They learn to recognize the fear response without letting it stop them. They learn to start before they feel ready. They learn that action creates clarity, not the other way around. They learn that perfection is a shield, fantasy is a drug, and friction is just resistance asking to be acknowledged. And most importantly, they learn to treat themselves with compassion. Because self-criticism doesn't motivate, it just adds another threat for your brain to avoid. So, here's your challenge. Right now, not tomorrow, not when you've planned it perfectly. Right now, pick one ambitious goal, the one that's been sitting in your notes app, the one you've been preparing for. Now ask yourself, what's the smallest possible step I could take in the next 5 minutes? Not the first big step, not the impressive step, the smallest step. Open the document. Write 1 sentence. Send 1 email. Draw 1 wireframe. Research 1 competitor. Don't plan it. Don't perfect it. Don't wait until you feel motivated. Just do that one tiny thing. Because here's the secret that changes everything. Your brain will follow action, not the other way around. The motivation you're waiting for? It comes after you start, not before. So start. Start messy. Start scared. Start with 5 minutes. But start. If this resonated with you, there's more to explore. The next video breaks down how to actually rewire your brain to enjoy discipline. Not just tolerate it, but genuinely find satisfaction in the process. Because once you understand the neuroscience of habit formation, everything changes. Like, share, and subscribe now. But before you click away, Remember this. You're not broken. You're human. And now you know how to work with that.